Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. Is your brand offering a seamless experience to your consumers today? Most successful brands have pivoted to offer a better experience across more touch points, but how sustainable is your digital transformation? Are you making the kind of moves to benefit you or your customers? Or will the pendulum swing way back in the other direction once we're all back outdoors? Phil Case is the Chief Client Officer at MaxConnect Marketing, as well as an executive board member of the Utah Outdoor Association. And on this episode, we'll discuss e-commerce, digital transformation, customer experience, investing in marketing during a pandemic, Utah and the outdoors, when your wife calls for a search and rescue mission, green jello with carrots, the mailman, cancel 2020, and a lot more. So let's tune in to an outdoor marketer with an underwater shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. All right. Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell me a little bit about your background and your career to date.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be with you today, Kenneth. My career has been in marketing. It's funny, I didn't choose that career path. Took a few classes in college on marketing. And when I began to go down, an internship and ultimately a career path, I kind of stumbled into it. And after a year or two of trying to get out, I began to realize it was probably some of the most fun I ever had. And every day my clients said to me, boy, this is the meeting I look forward to every week. And to think that I was able to live that every day. But I began in an agency called Fluid Advertising that I helped grow from 4 to about 35 employees and was a managing partner there for about 8 years. And then I recently left that agency and came to MaxConnect Marketing. And it's interesting. I interviewed about 10 other agencies and looked throughout the country, and I was impressed with the, kind of the digital chops and skill set that this team had, and just the overall culture was a great fit. I've been here as the Chief Client Officer for about a year.
So also, what are you doing with the Utah Outdoor Association? That's something else you're passionate about, I understand.
I have just an outdoor enthusiast since I was a kid. I love to explore and discover, and I'm regularly lost. I have had search and rescue call on me. I won't claim more than once, but so as an individual, love to be outside, backcountry skiing, anything you can imagine. And it was a few years back, we approached here locally in Utah, the Office of Outdoor Recreation from the governor and said, what can we do to help propel the industry forward? There was the OR show, the Outdoor Retailer Show that recently left the state. There was a lot of sordid history around Bears Ears and a lot of real political kind of land grabs by Trump and Obama and Patagonia getting involved. And Utah kind of had a little bit of a black eye, and all the larger outdoor brands that are iconic located in Utah were fairly upset about how the state handled it. And so, it was kind of recommended to us, what Utah needs is an association, a trade association representing outdoor brands. And so about 3 years ago, we began it, gathered the most prominent outdoor brands that are some of the largest in the world, and organized the board of directors. And we began to recruit members and host meetings and, recruit and develop talent and really help this industry that, was passionate about what they do become integrated and build an ecosystem and a community to support them in their own business growth. And so I've done a lot there. I invest a lot of time on the executive board for Utah Outdoor. And for me, it's a personal passion, and I love rubbing shoulders with those types of individuals too.
You let a nugget out there that we got to dive a little bit deeper into. Search and rescue was called on you before. You got to tell us that story.
So search and rescue was called on me last year. It was actually the eve of my birthday. And I had gone out, so with a professional kind of networking group of sorts, they had hosted an event annually that I had helped plan and sponsor. And I took the Google Maps road in my car. And when I approached, kind of near to where, Google Maps put me on this dirt road that in a normal months would have been fine. But there was enough snow, just based on the wintertime in February, that it went from, half a foot to 3 feet deep, and then ultimately to 5 feet deep. And so 3 miles into it, my car gets stuck. I have no cell service. I ditch my car, walk 3 miles to get to the event in waist deep snow. Finally arrive in time for my sponsorship pitch and lunch. And then I go out on snowmobiles. The last thing my wife ever heard from me was, I'm going snowmobiling but I have a critical meeting I can't miss. I'm meeting with Sportsman's Warehouse at 4. I'll call you on the way there. And then she never heard from me. And at 7 o'clock, she got nervous and she called search and rescue, had them deployed. They were able to triangulate my cell signal from multiple locations and ultimately put me back on that dirt road that when I was trying to tow my car out. But I ended up snowmobiling, had a great experience, and then went to my car, and she just never knew I made it back to the car. And we got a tow truck stuck that we had to ultimately pull out of there, had 2 other cars stuck, and finally we had to reverse for 2 miles to get my car out without without getting any other vehicles stuck in the road. So it was quite the experience.
Well, all your great explorers, DeSoto, Magellan, Davy Crockett, they all use Google Maps. That's where you had me. So,
Exactly.
When you look at where we are today, coming out of the pandemic, we're nearing the end of 2020. Thank goodness, because I want it to be completely over. You could cancel 2020 as far as I'm concerned. But when you look at your brand, let's say it's an outdoor brand in Utah or anywhere else, what kind of advice are you giving them right now as to where to position themselves to come out of this?
It's interesting. I keep in close contact with the outdoor brands, and really the advice varies. And I'll explain what I mean. There hasn't been as much of a resurgence and interest in the outdoors as there's been in 2020.
Exactly.
People are flocking to the outdoors. Every outdoor brand we work with, they have 2 problems. It's either they can't keep inventory in stock and it's just, through the roof in terms of interest, or the specialty retailers have slowed down their purchasing and their POs. And so they've had to pivot online. Every major billion-dollar plus outdoor brand I've talked to has said our e-commerce has beat every projection above 200% this year. I talked to Sportsman's Warehouse. They took their marketing budget from a very generous amount, which I won't share, down to 0. And they said we can't help but sell more guns if we wanted to with the pending election, right? And so it's been a really interesting environment between COVID, people being drawn to the outdoors and more natural places and looking for things to do, and then having the election, and as polarized as we are as a country, people are finding some sort of peace and acceptance there. And so what this means for brands is this ability to, one, have digital transformation at the forefront, and being able to take that, particularly for outdoor, but any brand and manufacturer, they've been almost nervous to do a full direct-to-consumer model. And where they've begun to kind of dip their toes in the water with Amazon, sell some things on their website, we're seeing that being part of a major focus of their business now. As we get into the latter part of 2020, I was speaking to a brand that has 21 retail locations and in the Western United States. And she said, everything that we're doing and preparing for 2021, regardless of COVID, is shifting resources to online, because that's where consumers are looking. That's where they're shopping. Their e-commerce business is up 600% specifically. And it's remarkable. We look at some of the facts and figures. It took us 10 years to go from 9% e-commerce penetration rate to 19%. We went from 19% in March of 2020. 6 months later, we're flirting with almost a 40% e-commerce penetration rate as a percentage of total retail sales. And so those type of major shifts are causing brands to say, what digital touch points do we have? How do we tell our own story? And how do we begin to personalize the customer journey in a really meaningful way to endear them to our brand?
Well, then how are you starting to look at 2021 though? Because you're in a place that is very outdoorsy, and we're going to see a shift once the election's over, once everybody's got a vaccine. It's when I can get back on stage and present at a conference again. Everybody's shopping or going to restaurants or theaters without a mask on. Now that may be in 2030, the way it sometimes feels, depending on which news channel you watch. But at some point, we're going to get back out to normal, and that same pendulum shift may go even further the opposite way when you look at e-commerce. It may be, I don't necessarily think it will be, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate as well. It may be that all these touch points that we're fixing, everybody runs to an e-commerce path. But at some point, you're going to find a lot more people that want to go shop in stores again or eat at restaurants again. And not everybody's going to get their food delivered by DoorDash and Uber Eats sometime in the future.
Shark, you brought up a great point. Let me quote Shopify CEO Tobias. I love what he said just a few months ago. He said, the future we imagine for 2030 has been pulled forward to the present. And so I don't think any of us are of the opinion that we're going to continue this steady digital transformation at the same accelerated pace. In fact, some of it's going to be rolled back, so to speak. As human beings, we crave interaction. We love being together. It's so frustrating for all of us. I would love to go to a conference and event and pound the flesh, and I haven't been able to. And that's just the kind of person I am. And so I've been a little stir crazy. But here's what we're finding is that this omni-channel, when I say omni-channel, I'm referencing, if I'm a retailer, I need to have this seamless brand experience. Whether I walk into a Sportsman's Warehouse or if I'm on Sportsman's website or if I'm Black Diamond, I need to be able to begin that journey with my brand beyond an REI. And I need to make sure that as a brand, you will never waste time, dollars, or an investment of resources in continuing to have an incredible user experience, albeit in person or digitally. And so the pendulum will swing back slightly. I don't think it's going to overcorrect the other way. I think we'll find there'll be a much more balanced and nuanced approach that this omni-channel, this next normal that we're going to experience in 2021 and beyond will continue eventually to push more to a virtual digital type interaction while complementing in a meaningful way the physical human interaction. I mean, we're seeing, for instance, major retailers and Foot Lockers and Pay for Less. What they're doing, what Payless Shoes is doing right now is creating storefronts just to try shoes on, and then they'll drop ship them to you, as is Target, as is Macy's. And so I think we'll see the physical retailing really just more as a way to kind of come and have an experience, try things on, but most will be drop shipped and continue to be done via e-commerce.
We're seeing obviously real shift in habits, not just individuals' buying patterns. I mean, these are real shifts that could be long-term. You work as a chief client officer now with all the clients that you guys service. Where are you telling them to give advice on where to push their dollars today? Is it more of just a stay in that shift of content, or ultimately they're going to have to interrupt people with ads and start spending again?
It's interesting. In the early weeks of COVID, we had several, for instance, in the automotive space that came to us and said, what do we do? And here, what kind of message do we reflect? In a single week, there was a major regional car dealership that we pivoted their message 3 times, where we literally deployed a new ad set every 2 days until Friday. We finally had something that stuck for at least a week or two because the pandemic was changing things on the moment. Months later now, we've all kind of somewhat got familiar and comfortable. We had several brands that said to us, we have to scale back. We won't be able to sell homes or products or cars because people are just scared and nervous. And we challenged that. And we actually said, no, we think they will. And this government stimulus is coming. People will spend money, and you might see it in slightly different ways. But you need to continue to stay relevant and stay in front of them and grow market share.
Great
The
point.
brands we doubled down with, we took a car dealership from number 31 of the overall Hyundai volume sales in the country. During COVID, in the month of April, we took them to number 2 in the country because they doubled down on their marketing efforts. We looked at the digital touch points. We converted to a digital storefront, and the messaging was a COVID safe. You can continue to shop, and we're going to, waive all financing fees for 3 years. They had explosive growth. They've had record months since. And it's that type of, kind of stories that we hear coming out of COVID. The brands that invested, focused on their customer and said, how can we help you? And continued with ads to stay in front of them and the meaningful channels. There was more than enough ad inventory to go around because everybody was on social media and we had more than enough time on our hands. And so it was a matter of breaking through the clutter and helping these brands understand what meaningful value can you provide to consumers right now, and how do you help them feel like you hear them and know that they're in a difficult spot. We have home builders in the month of August that had record months, doubling revenue from the prior month. And so story after story, I could tell you of these type of unique kind of COVID circumstances where, yes, the economy's been difficult, but there's some clear winners. And in many, many ways, it's those that stuck to their guns, showed concern and acted in selfless ways, and continued to look at, growth in the future. And that's where we saw that shift of how the dollars were spent differed, but it doesn't mean you should go dark.
So you're in Utah, I'm in the central part of the country, but we both service clients globally. What's the mentality that you're seeing that's the same and or different with inside the coasts and then the West Coast and East Coast, which is obviously a lot different during COVID? Because it's a lot different to look at business and marketing for a lot of brands that are in Utah or Florida than it is, New Jersey or California.
Yeah, no, and to your point, Kenneth, we have clients on both sides of the coast and throughout the country. And we just met when we're interviewed by an editor publishing an article on what's happened in the home building industry with COVID and how people are migrating out of cities. And so we touched on this topic just 2 weeks ago. And we have a client that's in New York City, but also in New Jersey, and what they're seeing in terms of the growth of home sales. I mean, the people migrating out of New York City, migrating out of the Bay Area, migrating out of Chicago, those cities, not that they're going to, be a fraction of what they once were, but this kind of overpopulation and, packed metropolitan areas, that's shifting. People are moving more to the suburbs. They're moving out of the bigger cities. They're trying to spread out a little bit more. And so the mentality, I have a brother that's lived in the Bay Area for his entire career, working for Facebook and Apple and Samsung. And he recently just moved to Utah. And the only reason was he could work remote. And, Utah is one of those Zoom towns that you could call, where we're seeing this shift of, I can have a great lifestyle, lessen my cost of living, and still work for the company I want. And so the response that he saw to the pandemic on the coast, the response that, we have an employee out of New York City that's run, and been part of several large ad agencies, and we're on the phone with him, every other day. And it's just a different mindset, where here in Utah, we'll wear masks and do what we're asked to do, but we're playing soccer and, being able to engage in sports games and having family come over and doing, moderate sized gatherings. And the economy is fairly strong in this part of the country. The shutdown hasn't nearly been as severe, and businesses are thriving. I mean, we have most of our clients, in some regard, they're having very, very good years because it's caused them to focus, understand what they're good at, and be able to look a little bit more closely at their business strategy. And because they've been required to put more effort and pivot during more difficult times, they've actually come out better. And so that isn't the case across the country. Universally, there's been some areas that have been pretty hard hit, where restaurants have been closed and retailers have been closed, and they've taken dramatic haircuts. One of my former clients is the largest trampoline park in the world franchise, called Circus Tricks, and their revenue went from, several hundred million a year to zero when COVID hit. And they had some pretty significant restructuring, and there was nothing that they could do about it, just due to the fact of where their locations weren't opening. And so we know that people are having real pain, and we're sensitive to that. And yet we still think that there's always an opportunity to pivot, to transform your business, and to really take a hard look to say, even in difficult times, there's an opportunity to become better and sharpen the saw. And that's the approach we try to take.
Great points. And, everybody started shifting their mindset in March of 2020 when the pandemic started to shut things down. But if you were to give some timely and timeless marketing advice as we record this, the back quarter of the year, as you start looking at your own crystal ball for 2021, what's the best piece of marketing advice you can give to the modern day marketer today as to how they need to look at the rest of the world going forward?
I mean, a couple of things.
Tough loaded question, isn't it?
It's one we get often. One thing I would say in regards to looking to 2021, although you need to plan the year out and you need to begin to understand where do we invest time and resources and budget allocation. Be prepared to do a review of your marketing plan and strategy. I would say almost monthly, right? Right now is not a time to plan out full years and expect things to go swimmingly. You need to be nimble. I wouldn't be signing any 12-month contracts with media companies because you quite frankly don't know, where people are going to be at and how things will progress. Second, I would say that I think brands will need to continue to look at meaningful interactions and experiences that they can bring to consumers. And let me clarify that. We're doing more and more in our digital efforts on behalf of our clients to bring experiences to consumers versus bringing consumers to experiences. We can't physically have a lot of experiences right
Amen.
now. And Disney, for instance, who's the king of experiences, they're having to reinvent themselves. I saw an Adidas ad on Facebook that I loved, where you begin to have this, kind of panoramic view of a new shoe and a release, and you hit play, and you were able to not just watch a video, but begin to interact with this shoe and be able to explore a whole set of products. And so, how do we bring experiences to consumers online that are meaningful, that tell a story and allow consumers to envision themselves with the brand? I think brands need to do more brand building, but do it in less of a salesy and more of a consumer focused way.
Yeah, try to help them fix their problem instead of pushing features and benefits all the time. So Phil, I asked this of all my guests. I got to ask you, what is your favorite kind of shark and why? You've got a Salt Lake there. No sharks there, but it's close enough.
My kids are fascinated by sharks. My wife every year goes all out for Shark Week.
Oh yeah.
And we're watching on Discovery Channel, and it's kind of all the rage for a week here. Great whites are the ones we always look at. We have an aquarium up the road that we'll frequent, and we're, annual guests, and, my kids are there at least once a week. We've swam with copper sharks and done a little bit with great whites. And for me, the megalodon is just, I love prehistoric. I love dinosaurs, and there's been these megalodon sightings supposedly over the last several decades. And so, you look at the great white and you're nervous, and then you understand the size and scale of a megalodon, and it's just, it's not comparable. And so for me, I would love to see a megalodon, not face to face, but in some sort of capacity, because they fascinate me by their size and just kind of sheer grit.
Good point. Well, Phil, it's a special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Let's do it.
All right. Number 1, greatest Utah Jazz basketball players of all time, John Stockton or Karl Malone?
Oh, I love Karl Malone because he is who he is, and spoke candidly.
Yeah.
And whether it was grammatically correct or not, and just I love the way that he just drove the wins in the games.
Yeah, he was the mailman. So, all right. Number 2, REI or Sportsman's Warehouse? 2 names you brought up today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love Sportsman just because it's kind of the good old fashioned get your guns and go to battle type of thing. REI, just from a ski perspective and backpacking, that's a tough one. I think I fit the culture of Sportsman's Warehouse more, but I find myself buying more at REI, which is probably the wrong thing to say.
So you're not running for office. You got to pick one or the other.
Yeah, I spend more time at the REI and REI garage sales than anywhere else in my outdoor.
There you go. That works. Number 3, red Jell-O or green Jell-O?
Green. I love the taste of green Jell-O. You add a little bit of strawberry in there, and that for me is heaven.
So I read that Utahns eat twice the amount of lime green Jell-O as the rest of the population. A popular way to consume the sweet treat in Utah is to add shredded carrots to the mix, which just sounds absolutely horrible to me.
I would never have shredded carrots, but green Jell-O. My wife's a lover of mint and all things green, and so she's convinced me that green Jell-O is the way to go.
All right. Well, you're an outdoorsman. I know you mountain climb and you ski and things like that, or mountain bike and ski. Zion National Park or Arches National Park?
I was just at Arches a couple of days ago, had just a remarkable experience and loved it. But in terms of the water and the ability to do the Narrows and to do the subway, and that there's so much because of the water that I feel like Zion has over Arches, that I would go with Zion.
Yeah, we can see Arches in all the movies anyway. So, all right, number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Just had biscuits and gravy 3 mornings ago and loved it.
Good man. Yeah, I would eat it every day if I could. So, well, Phil, where can people find out more about you, keep up with what you're doing in the agency world and more?
I'm predominantly on LinkedIn. You can find me at Phil Case on LinkedIn, and just on our website, we do try to publish a decent amount on helping brands through these interesting times and navigating, kind of what's ahead in 2021. And so we'll continue to publish, hopefully, some helpful content for you.
Perfect. Well, Phil, thank you very much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you, Kenneth. Have a great day.
You bet. So that was my conversation with Phil Case, the Chief Client Officer at Max Connect Marketing, as well as an Executive Board member of the Utah Outdoor Association. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, the pandemic forced every retailer, every business even, to start looking at digital touchpoints, and the smartest ones are the ones that were doing that before and the ones that continue to do that today, and start looking way beyond. So people stop shopping in stores and shifted to e-commerce, but regardless of when the world is open and normal again, don't drop the ball at any point from that focus. This is something that more businesses should have been doing anyway. Why not spend more time focusing on making a site easy to use, make touch points more seamless, align your marketing, etc. This shouldn't be a new marketing trend or a woke moment for your brand. This is a better focus on customers, and that should always be at your core. Second, love this quote when he pointed out some good advice. And as a brand, you will never waste time, dollars, or an investment of resources in continuing to have an incredible user experience, albeit in person or digitally. It's a good quote, and we should all think about sustaining that going forward. Third, the brands that were smart with their marketing investments are the ones that focused on the customer and said, how can we help you? Amen to that. Sometimes it's just about helping them cut through that clutter in order to help them focus on that. And I wish more agencies were better aligned with those brands that they work with to help them cut through that clutter as a focus. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. It's time for us to get outdoors again, and for me at least, to jump back into the water. So join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.